He slapped me 15 times. Not a stranger. Not a thief. My own son. Each strike felt less like pain and more like proof. Proof that the boy I raised had turned into someone who saw me as nothing. His wife laughed. She filmed it. And when it was over, he walked away as if I were just noise. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply touched my face, still warm from his hand, and whispered the only truth left in that room. He forgot one thing. The house he hit me in still belongs to me. My name is Almira Kensington, and that night, I stopped being a mother and became something else entirely. I can still hear it, the quick crack of palm against skin, like a metronome counting down whatever was left between us. 15 blows. Each one landed with a little more certainty, a little less hesitation, until my face felt like a map of the life I'd given away. It happened at the table Paul built, the walnut piece with the hairline scar along one edge where he'd accidentally nicked the plane. Years of birthday candles and homework sprawled across that wood. The boards remembered laughter. That Sunday was supposed to be small, a private marking of the man we'd lost. I made his favorite chowder because some rituals are stubborn. They keep you tethered to the people who made you feel steady. She arrived early, all perfume and practiced smiles, placing a bottle of wine on the sideboard as if she were commissioning a set. Her greeting landed like a label. "Retired landlord," she said, in a tone that stripped something away. Not mother. Not guest. An arrangement. When he came in, the house tightened around him. He let the keys hit the table with a weight I'd never heard from him before. There was a tightness to his jaw, a shadow where warmth used to be. I tried the small things, the soft question, the quiet joke, the ways you keep the edges of family from fraying. They failed. She laughed at the tax notice I'd mentioned, a metallic sound that filled the room and left an ache behind it. He snapped. Words that should have been private became a verdict. "This is my house now. Stop pretending it's yours." The claim hung there, ugly and final. I told him plainly the truth I'd been carrying in a drawer for years. The transfer hadn't been filed. The paper trail never reached the registry. I said it like a fact, like a utensil handed over across a table, and then his hand came. The first strike shocked me into stillness. After the third, I began counting only to keep from hyperventilating, counting to remember I was a person with a pulse, not a story to be told by others. Her phone glowed in her palm. The lens drank in the scene and the sound of her laughter. When the last blow fell, he turned away as if he'd finished a chore. She leaned in and murmured something meant to wound, as if words could carve deeper than fists. I closed my eyes and let the small noises be my companions, a drip in the kitchen, the distant thrum of traffic, the murmur of the bay beyond the trees. My hand found my face and tasted iron. Pain burned, but beneath it something colder took hold, a clarity that sharpened with each shallow breath. I walked to Paul's old desk and opened the bottom drawer, the one labeled in his tidy hand, Property Documents. The folders were where the house lived on paper, where every decision had been quietly recorded. I flipped through until a slip of paper met my thumb. There it was, the deed, my name written across it, my signature still poised, the notary line conspicuously blank. The registry stamp hadn't come. He had acted like ownership was a declaration spoken aloud at dinner, but ownership, I thought, was procedural. It had receipts and seals and delays. He had ignored the small, important thing. A slow, steady resolve settled into the place the anger had been. I didn't shout. I didn't call anyone then. I sat at the table and listened to wind braid itself around the eaves. This would not be a scene of spectacle. It would be a quiet calculation. Legal, precise, irreversible, justice. I decided would be the kind that echoes, not shouts. Morning came gray and sluggish, as if the sky itself carried my bruises. My face throbbed where his hand had landed, but what hurt most sat deeper, somewhere under the ribs, where the ache of disbelief settles and refuses to move. I brewed coffee, packed a folder, and stepped out before they woke. The air in Portland was heavy with the smell of rain. The streets gleamed wet and empty, a quiet accomplice to my decision. I walked 3 blocks until I reached a small brick townhouse, the home of Roger Haldane, Paul's old friend and lawyer. He opened the door in a cardigan and slippers, eyes widening at the sight of me. Almira? My God. What happened? I need to know something. Roger. Legally. Inside, the house smelled of books and dust. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, slid a folder across the surface, and waited while he adjusted his glasses. The paper inside, the deed, looked older than it should have, but the ink was still mine. Roger studied every line with a patience that made my pulse loud in my ears. Minutes crawled, heavy and precise. Finally, he looked up. He never filed this. No notary seal, no registry record. Almira, the property's still yours. The words hit harder than I expected. My lungs refused to work for a moment. The air felt thick, the kind that shifts your bones when you inhale too deeply. So, I managed. If I sell it, you can, he interrupted, his voice softening. But are you sure? He's your son. I stared at the paper, the corner curling up like it wanted to escape. A small smile lifted one side of my mouth. So were his hands. Roger. 15 times large enough. He didn't argue. He only nodded, the kind of nod people give when they understand there's no undoing what's been done. He reached for his phone and made a call. A real estate contact, someone named Marcia Pierce. I barely heard the conversation. My reflection stared back at me from the dark surface of my coffee, unfamiliar and sharp. For the first time, I didn't see a broken mother. I saw a witness, and a woman with a plan. That night, the house no longer felt like mine. The wallpaper seemed to whisper in voices that weren't kind. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like judgment. When Serena saw me come through the door, her smile was sugar-coated poison. Out for a walk. Mother? I met her eyes, matched her sweetness, and answered, yes, a long one. They left Friday morning, suitcase wheels bumping along the driveway, laughter trailing behind like perfume. A break from all the stress, Serena said, kissing the air near my cheek as if even proximity could stain her. The sound of the car fading down the street was the cleanest silence I'd ever known. The moment they disappeared, I called Roger. By noon, he arrived with the Pierces, a young couple from Boston, polite, well-dressed, eyes full of cautious curiosity. They looked like people who believed in clean starts. I liked them instantly. They didn't ask questions. The offer was fair, cash ready, professional. At the notary's office, I watched the clerk stamp each page. The echo of the metal seal was louder than it should have been, a private gavel hitting the desk of my heart. When I signed my name, my hand was steady, not out of confidence, but clarity. For the first time in years, I felt something resembling control. When it was done, Roger gave me a look halfway between concern and admiration. "You're certain about this?" he asked. "I've never been more certain about anything," I said. That afternoon, I returned to the house one last time. I packed a small suitcase, just clothes, Paul's old watch, and my journal. The rest could stay behind with the ghosts that no longer frightened me. On the dining table, beside a faded family photo, I placed the house key. The door clicked softly when I closed it, a sound gentler than a gunshot but carrying the same finality. As I walked away, I whispered, "Justice shouldn't scream. It should echo." By evening, the train was gliding south, the city retreating behind me in a blur of lights and wet glass. My reflection in the window looked older, sharper, lighter. Somewhere behind that glass, behind those streets. Serena was probably bragging to her friends about how she and Evan were finally selling the house. She just didn't know it was already gone. The train was still moving when I pictured it. Their return. Serena, stepping through the door first, sunglasses still on, her designer heels clicking against the floor like punctuation marks of ownership. Evan behind her, shoulders square with that arrogance he wore like armor. They would expect familiarity, comfort, control. They would expect me to be gone quietly, like the background noise they'd finally silenced. But what they'd find were strangers standing in their dining room. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't have to be. The image came to me clear as a film reel. Serena's sharp gasp, Evan's confusion hardening into rage. Then my phone rang. Roger's voice held a tremor between disbelief and restrained satisfaction. "They're home. Almira," he said. "And the Pierces are already inside. And they called the police." Serena screamed. "Evan's furious, but the officers checked the registry. The deed is under your name. The sale is completely legal." For a long moment, I said nothing. I could almost hear it, Serena's voice breaking in anger. Evan shouting my name, the sound of their control slipping through their fingers like sand. That house had always felt like a cage to me. Now, it was theirs. I imagined Serena pounding the door, her manicured hands cracking against the frame. I imagined Evan, drenched in rain, staring at the place he once called home, realizing his kingdom had been built on a lie. Roger's voice softened. "Do you feel better?" I looked out the window at the passing coastline. "Not better," I said, "just balanced." By evening, the city was humming with gossip. News travels quickly in towns like Portland. Neighbors whispered about the scene, Serena screaming, Evan cursing, police cars idling outside. Someone filmed it from across the street and uploaded it. Within hours, the clip spread online. The Kensington scandal. The captions read. Then came the edit. 2 videos merged into one. The first, the night Evan hit me. The second, the day he lost everything. The narrative flipped overnight. Those who once pitied Serena now called her the laughing wife. The world can be cruel, but sometimes it gets the story right. By midnight, they had nowhere to go. No home, no respect. Just each other and a reputation in ruins. And I, for the first time in years, slept without nightmares. Not in triumph, but in silence. Watching the moon smear across the train window, I whispered to my reflection, "Justice shouldn't scream, it should echo." Newport smelled of salt and bread, the kind of scent that softens the edges of loneliness. I rented a small attic above a bakery run by a widow who didn't ask questions. Every morning, the sound of gulls and the low hum of the ocean told me I'd made it somewhere quieter, somewhere clean. Freedom felt foreign, too quiet, almost guilty. A week passed before Roger called again. His tone was heavy, careful. "Evan lost his position," he said. "The firm saw the videos. Serena's filed for separation, claimed emotional abuse." I laughed, low and bitter. "Abuse?" "Yes," he said, "cheat out. She's telling everyone she was the victim all along." The irony nearly made me choke. The woman who laughed while I was hit now played the part of the wounded. Her performance was flawless, crocodile tears and all. That night, I walked to the pier. The sea was wild, crashing against the rocks like applause for the chaos we'd all created. The cold wind slapped my cheeks, not with pain but memory. I stood there until my fingers went numb, realizing that the ocean doesn't forget. It erases in layers, patient and unstoppable. 2 days later, a letter came to the bakery. No return address, no kindness in its handwriting. You'll pay for what you did. You ruined our lives. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it between the pages of my journal. Fear didn't come this time, only understanding, revenge, like the tide, always leaves something behind. That night, thunder rolled over the bay. For a moment, I thought I heard Evan's voice carried by the wind, angry, broken, lost. Once, when I glanced out the window, I thought I saw a car parked near the corner, engine running, headlights off, a shadow waiting. But when I stepped outside, there was nothing, just sea fog swallowing the street. I went back upstairs and opened my journal. My hand didn't shake as I wrote, "If pain is the currency of justice, I've paid mine in full. Now I wait for change." The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It came steady and gray, washing the edges off everything, the sky, the sea, even the small life I'd built above the bakery. I was writing at my desk when I saw a figure standing outside through the window, blurred by rain and distance. He didn't move, didn't even try to shield himself. I didn't need to guess who it was. A mother always knows, even when she prays she's wrong. Evan stood there, oars soaked through, shivering, a duffel bag sagging at his side. The arrogance that used to fill his body had drained out, leaving something hollow in its place. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Mom, I have nowhere to go." I didn't open the door wide. I just handed him my umbrella. "We can talk outside." He blinked at me, confused, then followed as I led him down to the beach behind the bakery. The sea was rough, the wind howling, waves crashing like arguments that had never really ended. "You humiliated me," he said first, his voice rising above the surf. "You made me a joke." I stared out at the gray horizon. "Now you know what humiliation feels like." He flinched, rain dripping from his chin. "I lost everything. Serena left me. I lost my job, my friends. I sleep in my car." A long pause stretched between us. What I felt wasn't pity, but something more complicated. A quiet recognition of how pain circles back. I remembered a little boy on this same beach, building castles too close to the tide. "You chose this, Evan," I said softly. "You chose her cruelty and your pride. You thought love meant control." His eyes filled. "She used me. She leaked the video. Mom said I disgusted her. Everyone saw it." I turned toward him. "So now you finally see what you looked like from the outside." He took a shaking breath. "Please, I need a place to stay. Just for a while." I shook my head. "My door isn't locked. Evan, it's just closed." He dropped to his knees, the waves creeping closer around him. "You're all I have left." "Then learn to have yourself," I said. My voice didn't tremble from anger, only from release. He stood at last and walked away, slow and heavy. The tide came in behind him, filling his footprints until the sand looked untouched. The sea erased him before my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing his back disappearing into the rain, feeling not vindication but something stranger, forgiveness from a distance, the kind that doesn't invite you back, only lets you go. Before dawn, I opened my journal and wrote, "Justice sometimes means saying no, even when your heart aches to say yes." A month later, a letter came stamped, Superior Court of Maine. I was being summoned as a witness. Serena was suing Evan, claiming physical and emotional abuse, using the same video she once laughed through. When Roger told me, I almost laughed myself, but the sound never made it past my throat. "She's weaponizing the truth," I said. "That's what manipulators do," he replied. "But this time, you'll have the last word." The courtroom smelled of polish and history, the kind of place where guilt lingers in the walls. Evan sat 2 seats away, gaunt and shaking. Serena, on the other hand, looked immaculate, a black suit, perfect makeup, her tears rehearsed. When the video played, the sound filled the room. Each slap echoed like a confession neither of us could take back. I watched it without flinching. It wasn't just me on that screen. It was the weight of every silence I'd swallowed, every line a woman had been told not to cross. The prosecutor's voice broke the stillness. "Mrs. Kensington, do you confirm this video shows your son assaulting you?" "Yes," I said. "Did his wife encourage it?" "Yes." Serena's mask slipped. "I was terrified," she shouted. "He was violent." I turned to her. My tone stayed calm. "You laughed. Serena, you didn't record to protect yourself. You recorded to enjoy it." The courtroom gasped. The judge's gavel hit wood, calling for order, but truth moves faster than decorum. When the hearing ended, Serena stormed out first, her heels hitting the floor like gunshots. Evan didn't move. He just sat there, staring at nothing. As I passed him, he whispered, "Mom, I don't deserve to be forgiven." I stopped long enough to meet his eyes. Then stop asking for it. Start being someone who could be. Outside, Roger waited beneath the pale Maine sun. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter," I said. Like I finally put something down I didn't realize I'd been carrying. By evening, the verdict came. Serena won financial restitution, but her image shattered. The judge noted her behavior had fueled the violence. Evan was spared prison, but not shame. His career was gone, his name ruined. When I returned to the bakery, another letter waited. It was short. "I'm leaving Maine. Starting over somewhere no one knows my name. E." I folded it, slipped it between the pages of my journal, and sat by the window. Maybe that was the only apology he could give, and the only one I still needed. After the trial, silence became its own verdict. The city moved on, but my world stood still. For days, I barely spoke. The bakery below my room filled the air with the smell of cinnamon, sweet, forgiving, undeserved. I kept the windows open to let it in, as if the scent itself could soften the sharp edges of everything I'd survived. One evening, I sat by the window with a pen in hand and a sheet of paper waiting like a confession I'd postponed for years. I didn't think. I just wrote, "Evan, you were my greatest joy and my deepest wound. I don't hate you, but I can no longer carry you." The words came slowly, my handwriting careful and deliberate, every curve of ink a quiet release. It felt like laying stones, not to build a bridge back to him, but to wall off what had already burned down. I slipped a folded copy of the house deed into the envelope, the one that once defined who we were. It no longer mattered. That paper had held power over both of us. Now it was only proof that I had let go. When I sealed the envelope, the sound was small, final, not the end of a war, but the sigh after one. Roger called that night. His voice was soft. "He's leaving Maine," he said, "heading south. Said he wants to start over where nobody knows his name." I thanked him, then hung up. Outside, the moon laid its silver hand across the ocean. The tide crept higher, slow and certain, swallowing the footprints of the day. I stood there and whispered to the wind, "That's good." Evan, let it all wash away. The next morning, I mailed the letter. When the clerk stamped it, the sound was firm, final, and for the first time in years, my hands didn't shake. A year slipped quietly into the tide, carrying with it the noise of everything that had been time. I learned. Moves like the ocean. It doesn't heal you. It smooths you down until the edges stop cutting. With part of the money from the house sale, I bought a small cottage in Newport, a white shell with blue shutters and a view that opened straight into the sea. The first morning I woke there, gulls circled above the water, and I realized it was the first dawn in years that didn't hurt to see. I wanted the silence to mean something, so I built something out of it. Once a week, women gathered around my kitchen table, women who carried secrets like invisible bruises. Some wore pearls over the scars they'd never spoken of. Some kept their wedding rings on as if the weight of them could hide the truth. I called the workshop Reclaiming Voice. We wrote in long stretches of quiet broken only by the scratch of pens and the soft catch of breath when memory surfaced. Their sentences started brittle, then strong, like rivers learning to flow again. One afternoon, after class, a young woman lingered behind. She clutched a copy of my small, self-published book, essays pulled from the journals I'd once hidden like contraband. "I saw your story online," she said, her voice trembling. "The video, you don't know me, but it saved me. I left my husband that night. For a second, I couldn't speak." Her words struck with a force no hand ever could. I had spent years burying my pain, but now it had found its way out of the grave, not as shame, but as shelter for someone else. For the first time, it felt like the pain had done something good. That evening, as I watered the lavender by the porch, a delivery truck pulled up to the gate. The driver handed me a small parcel, unmarked except for my name in careful handwriting I hadn't seen in a long time. Inside was a framed photograph, my old house in Portland. The lawn was overgrown, the shutters faded, but standing in front of it was Evan, thinner, older, almost unrecognizable. Below the photograph was a note written in his familiar hand. "Thank you for setting me free. Evan." I sank onto the porch step, the picture trembling in my hands. Was it an apology, a farewell, or his way of saying he finally understood? The wind lifted from the water, carrying the faint scent of salt and lilacs. I looked out toward the horizon, the sea endless and calm. The waves brushed the shore softly, as if the ocean itself leaned close to whisper, "It's done." It was the anniversary of the workshop's beginning, and exactly 2 years since that night. The evening air carried the smell of salt and blooming jasmine, the kind of scent that makes memory both softer and sharper. I set a long wooden table on the porch, facing the open sea. The waves were calm, the horizon painted in slow strokes of gold and lavender. On the table were 15 candles, each one slender, white, simple. One for every slap, every scar, every lesson I had carried and learned to let go of. The women from my class arrived one by one, their voices low, their laughter careful but genuine. They brought small dishes, flowers, pages of writing folded in half like secrets ready to be shared. When we gathered around, I struck the first match. The flame caught quickly, bending with the wind before standing steady. "Every light you see," I told them, "was once a wound, but when we stop hiding them, they become beacons." We went around the table, each woman lighting her candle and speaking a single word aloud: forgiveness, strength, courage, truth. When my turn came, I whispered mine: freedom. The word felt weightless and solid at the same time, like the tide pulling away and returning in the same breath. The sun dipped lower, brushing the ocean's surface with molten light. 15 flames flickered in the evening breeze, their reflections trembling on the water below. Pieces of my old self, broken but shining again. Popcorn, the stray cat who had decided months ago that I was hers, curled up at my feet, purring as if she'd been part of this story all along. Roger and his wife came last, bringing a bottle of wine and quiet smiles that needed no words. We poured glasses and raised them, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement of pain survived, of lives reclaimed. As the sky darkened to deep indigo, I looked out at the line where the sea met the stars. For the first time in years, thinking of Paul didn't hurt. And when I thought of Evan, I didn't feel anger or shame, only a quiet understanding, the kind that comes when you finally stop trying to rewrite the past. He bruised my face, I said softly to the night, but I rebuilt my life. And that's what survival means. No one replied. They didn't need to. The wind answered for them, carrying the scent of salt and wax and something else. Peace. Maybe. The candles burned low, their wax pooling into small, glowing halos. I didn't blow them out. The wind did, gently, deliberately, as if the world itself was closing a chapter with care. And in the darkness that followed, I didn't feel empty. There was no silence, no echo of revenge, just the steady rhythm of waves against the shore, the heartbeat of something still alive. The sea glimmered under the starlight, endless and forgiving. I watched until the horizon disappeared, knowing that every scar, every loss, every moment of rage had carried me here, to this porch, to this peace, to these 15 lights that once burned as pain and now shone as proof that I had survived.